My brother hit every date I brought to holidays until I started dating his therapist. My name is Nolan, and I am 33 years old. I grew up in Ohio, in one of those families where everyone lives within 20 mi of each other, and you are basically required to show up to every holiday gathering or face the wrath of Grandma Lorraine. Callum is my younger brother. He is 3 years younger than me, and he has been the golden child of the family since we were kids. Here's the thing about Callum. He is good looking, like genuinely annoyingly good looking. Dark hair, sharp jaw, the kind of easy smile that makes strangers trust him in about 4 seconds. The kind of man who could walk into a room in a wrinkled shirt and still have every woman there leaning toward him like he was the only light in the building. And he knows it. He has known it since we were teenagers. The first time it happened, I was 24. I had just started dating this woman named Haley. She was a graphic designer. Really sweet, kind of shy. We had been together for about 4 months, and I was nervous about bringing her to Thanksgiving because my family can be a lot. But Haley insisted she wanted to meet everyone, said she was serious about me. The dinner was at my Aunt Carol's house. Callum showed up in this fitted sweater and a watch that cost more than my car, looking like he had walked off a magazine spread. But nobody said anything about how much he was performing because nobody ever says anything to Callum. My mom just gave me this look like, here we go, and went back to mashing potatoes. Haley and I were sitting on the couch after dinner, just talking with my uncle about football or whatever. Callum came over and sat down on the arm of the couch right next to Haley. He started asking her all these questions about her design work, leaning in like every word she said was fascinating, laughing at things that were not jokes. He pulled out his phone and showed her some project he was working on and asked for her professional opinion, all earnest and humble. I am sitting right there, and he is just acting like I do not exist. Haley looked a little flustered, but also, he is charming and Callum is Callum. By the end of the night, I caught them talking alone on the back porch. She was laughing at something he said, and he had that look on his face, the focused one. When they saw me, Callum just smiled this innocent smile and said, I was just telling Haley how lucky you are to have her. Haley and I broke up 3 weeks later. She said she needed space, that she was not ready for something serious. I saw her tagged in one of Callum's Instagram photos 2 months after that. They were at some rooftop bar downtown. He had his arm around her. That was the pattern. Every single relationship I had, every single woman I brought home, Callum would work his way in. It did not matter if it was Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, 4th of July. If I showed up with a date, he showed up turned all the way up, and by the end of the night, he would have her attention. There was Renata, the teacher I dated when I was 26. Callum cornered her by the dessert table and spent 30 minutes telling her about the mentoring program he volunteered with for at-risk kids. They exchanged numbers to coordinate a school event. I found out later they had been texting for weeks. There was Joelle, the accountant. Callum asked her to help him look over some paperwork for a side business he was starting. I was not invited. When I asked Joelle about it, she got defensive and said I was being insecure and possessive. There was Talia. There was Daniela. There was Naomi. Every single one. The worst part was that my family just let it happen. My mom would pull me aside and tell me that Callum was just friendly and did not mean anything by it. My aunt would say that I should not bring women around if I could not keep them interested. My grandma told me I should learn to carry myself with more confidence, and maybe then I could hold on to a woman. I stopped bringing dates to family events for years. I just showed up alone. I told my family I was focusing on my career, that I was happy being single. The truth was I was dating. I just refused to give Callum any more ammunition. But then I turned 32 and I met someone. Her name was Priscilla, and she was perfect. A trauma surgeon. Sharp, funny, kind. The kind of person who walked into a hospital and made everyone calmer. We had been together for 8 months, and it was the most stable, healthy relationship I had ever had. She kept asking to meet my family, and I kept making excuses. But eventually, Christmas was coming up, and I could not avoid it anymore. I told Priscilla about Callum. I sat her down and explained the whole history, every detail. I told her he would probably try something, and I needed her to just ignore him, stay close to me, not fall for his act. Priscilla laughed. She actually laughed. She said, Nolan, I run a trauma bay. I am not going to get swept off my feet by your little brother at a Christmas party. I love you. Stop worrying. I wanted to believe her. I really did. Christmas Eve arrived and we drove to my parents' house. I was so anxious I felt sick. Priscilla kept holding my hand, telling me everything would be fine. Callum was already there when we arrived. He was wearing this perfectly tailored jacket, sleeves pushed up, looking like he had stepped out of a cologne ad. He saw Priscilla and his eyes lit up like he had just won something. You must be Priscilla, he said, walking over with this big smile. I have heard so much about you. Nolan is so lucky. He hugged her. It lasted too long. Priscilla was polite but distant. She kept her hand on my arm, made a point of mentioning us, stayed by my side. I started to relax. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe Priscilla really was different. But Callum was patient. He always was. He spent the whole evening circling us. He would join whatever conversation we were in, ask her thoughtful questions about her work, find the one detail that made her light up. He told her his buddy had collapsed at a gym last year and asked her, all serious, what the signs of a cardiac event were. Because she is a surgeon, she must know. I watched her hesitate. I watched her glance at me, and then I watched her follow him to the kitchen to explain it, where it was quieter. They were gone for 15 minutes. When they came back, Priscilla looked a little flushed and Callum looked very pleased with himself. She said they were just talking, that he was asking medical questions about his friend. I wanted to scream. We left early. I told my family I had a headache. Priscilla drove home in silence while I stared out the window. She swore nothing happened. She swore she loved me, that Callum was just curious, that I was overreacting, but I could see it in her face. That same look all the others had, that flicker of interest, that pull. The thing nobody understood was that Callum never had to do anything obvious. He never had to make a move in front of me. He just had to plant the idea, the little splinter of doubt, the sense that there was something more interesting in the next room, and then he could sit back and let it grow on its own. By the time the relationship fell apart weeks later, it never even looked like his doing. It looked like mine. It always looked like mine. We broke up in February. She said the hours of her residency were too much for a relationship. I saw her at a restaurant in March with a tall guy in a suit. It was not Callum, but it might as well have been. I was done. I stopped dating. I stopped going to family events. I told my mom I was busy with work, that I would visit when I could. She was disappointed, but I did not care anymore. I was tired of being humiliated. I was tired of Callum winning. Then something weird happened. I started showing up to this Saturday morning trail running group that met at a park near my apartment. I signed up because my doctor told me my blood pressure was creeping up, and I needed to do something with the anger I was carrying around all the time. The group was maybe a dozen people, all different paces, and we would run the river loop and then get coffee after. That is where I met Sloane. She was a few years older than me, quiet, with this calm, steady way of talking that made you feel like she was actually listening. We ended up running the same pace, so we ran together most Saturdays, and somewhere between mile 2 and mile 5, you end up telling a near stranger things you would not tell your own family. I told her about my job as a logistics manager, about hiking, about the weather in Ohio, basic stuff. She told me she was a therapist, that she had a private practice in town, that she ran on Saturdays to clear out everything she had absorbed all week. She never talked about her clients, not once. She had this hard line about it that I respected. We ran together once a week at first, then we started getting coffee after, then we started texting during the week, then almost every day. Sloane was funny in this dry, quiet way, and thoughtful in a way the people I dated never were. After a few months, I told her about my family, about Callum, about feeling invisible and inadequate and angry. I told her about Haley on the back porch and Priscilla in the kitchen, and the way my own mother looked at me like I was the problem. Sloane did not judge me. She did not tell me to be more confident or to just ignore him. She did not rush in with advice the way everyone always did. She just let me talk until I ran out of words, and then she said, "Your brother sounds like someone who only feels powerful when he is taking something from somebody else. That is not about you. That is about whatever hole he is trying to fill, and it is a hole you will never be able to fill for him, no matter how much he takes." Something about the way she said it, the simplicity of it, made sense to me in a way nothing ever had. I noticed she got very still for a second when I said his name, and I noticed she changed the subject a little too smoothly afterward, but I did not think anything of it. I figured she was just being careful, the way she was careful about everything. There were Saturdays we barely talked at all, just ran side by side, breathing hard up the long hill at the back of the loop, and somehow those runs felt as close as the ones where I told her everything. She remembered things, small things. She remembered that I hated the cold, and that my dad and I had never really known how to talk to each other, and that I always ordered the same thing at the coffee place and pretended to consider the menu anyway. Nobody had paid attention to me like that in years, maybe ever. We ran together and talked for 8 months. I started looking forward to Saturday mornings more than anything else in my week. Then one Saturday after our run, sitting on the tailgate of her car with 2 coffees going cold between us, she said she needed to be honest about something, that she liked me, that she had liked me for a while, and that if I did not feel the same way she would understand, and nothing would have to change. I kissed her before she finished the sentence. We started dating, officially I guess, though it felt strange to call it that after months of pretending we were just running buddies. She was different from anyone I had ever been with. She listened when I talked. She did not play games. She said what she meant. She could tell when I was anxious or wound up before I said anything. She knew when I needed to talk and when I needed to just sit. It was like having someone actually see me for the first time in my life. My mom called in October and asked if I was coming to Thanksgiving. I had been avoiding her calls, but I finally picked up. She said the whole family missed me, that Grandma Lorraine was asking about me, that it had been almost a year since I had come to a holiday. I told her I would think about it. Sloane and I were lying on her couch that night when I mentioned it. She asked why I was hesitant, and I told her about Callum again, about the pattern, about how I could not handle watching it happen one more time. Sloane was quiet for a long moment, longer than felt normal. Then she said, "Take me." I laughed. I said, "You do not want to meet my family. Trust me." She said, "I am serious. Take me to Thanksgiving. Let me meet this brother of yours." I told her it was a bad idea. I told her Callum would eat her alive, that he had ended every relationship I had ever brought around him. I told her he was good-looking and charming and ruthless. Sloane just looked at me with this steady expression I could not read. She said, "I have spent my whole career sitting across from people who are very good at performing. I think I can handle your brother." I thought about it, and then I thought, screw screw it. Why not? What was the worst that could happen? Callum would charm Sloane. I would lose another relationship. I would never speak to my family again. I was already halfway there, so I said yes. Thanksgiving morning, I woke up with this knot in my stomach. Sloane seemed calm. Too calm, almost. She wore a simple dark sweater and jeans. Nothing flashy. She looked good, normal, like a regular person you would bring home to meet your family. We drove to my parents' house. I gave her one more warning. I said, Callum is going to come after you hard. He's going to flirt. He's going to find a reason to get you alone. Please just stay with me. Do not fall for it. Sloane took my hand. She said, Nolan, I'm not going anywhere. I promise. We walked in, and the whole family was there. My mom hugged me like I had been gone for years. My dad shook Sloane's hand and asked her what she did for work. Sloane said, I'm a counselor, and my dad nodded and said something about how everybody could use one of those these days. Then Callum walked in from the kitchen. He was wearing a slim charcoal Henley and that watch, hair perfect, looking like he had been styled for the occasion. He saw Sloane and I swear I could see the wheels turning in his head. He walked over with this easy, confident smile. You must be Sloane, he said, extending his hand. I'm Callum, the better-looking brother. Sloane shook his hand briefly. Nice to meet you. Callum held her hand just a second too long. I have heard absolutely nothing about you. Nolan keeps his life so private. He looked at me with this fake, warm expression. How long have you two been together? A few months, I said. That is great, Callum said. How did you two meet? I opened my mouth, not sure what to say, but Sloane answered first. Running group. Callum's smile widened. A runner. I should have guessed. You look like you take care of yourself. Sloane just said, I run to clear my head, and turned back toward me. Callum launched into his usual routine. He asked Sloane about her work, about where she grew up, about what she did for fun. He leaned in when she talked. He found little excuses to touch her elbow, her shoulder. He did everything he always did, but something was off, and it took me a minute to realize what it was. Sloane was not playing along. She answered him in short, even sentences, and then let the silence sit there. And Callum is a person who cannot stand silence, so he kept filling it, talking more and more, working harder and harder. When he suggested she come see the wine cellar my dad had put in, just the two of them, she said, I think Nolan would love to see it too, and kept her hand in mine. I could see Callum getting frustrated. This was not how it usually went. Usually by this point, the woman would be flushed and laughing and finding reasons to be near him. Sloane was watching him the way you watch a weather pattern, calm, unbothered, a little amused. Dinner was the same. Callum sat across from us and spent the whole meal trying to engage Sloane. He told stories designed to make himself sound generous and deep. The mentoring, the charity 10K he ran, the time he talked a stranger off a hard night. He name-dropped a restaurant he had an in at. He mentioned, twice, that he had been thinking about getting his pilot license. He laughed loudly at his own jokes and looked around the table to make sure everyone had caught them. Sloane was polite. She nodded. She smiled a little. But mostly she talked to my grandma about her garden and asked my uncle about his years working the railroad. And when Callum tried to steer the conversation back to himself, she would answer him in one clean sentence and then turn back to whoever she had actually been talking to, so that he kept getting handed the spotlight and then watching it slide right back off of him. I had never seen anyone do that to Callum. He did not know what to do with it. He started talking faster, reaching, telling a story about backpacking through Patagonia that I was fairly sure he had stolen from a coworker. And every so often I caught Sloane looking at him with this strange, almost sad expression, like she was seeing something the rest of us could not, like she already knew the ending of a movie the rest of us were still watching. After dinner, everyone moved to the living room. Callum cornered Sloane by the bar cart. I watched from across the room, my heart pounding. This was usually when it happened. The private conversation, the exchanged numbers, the beginning of the end. I saw Callum lean in close to her. I saw him put a hand on the wall beside her, boxing her in a little, all charm and teeth. I saw him say something low in her ear. Sloane did not lean away. She looked him dead in the eye and said something back, just a few words, and I watched the color drain out of my brother's face. I watched Callum, who had never lost his composure in front of me in his entire life, take a step back like he had touched a hot stove. He set his drink down. He walked out of the room. He did not come back for almost an hour. My mom leaned over and whispered, "What did you do to your brother? He looks like he saw a ghost." I had no idea. Sloane came back and sat next to me on the couch and put her head on my shoulder and said, very quietly, "Can we leave soon?" We stayed another 20 minutes for appearances, and then we left. When we finally pulled out of the driveway, I felt like I could breathe, but I also felt like something enormous had just happened that I did not understand. In the car, I asked Sloane what she had said to Callum by the bar cart that made him look like that. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Nolan, I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me get all the way through it before you say anything." My stomach dropped. She said, "Your brother is my client, or he was. He has been coming to my office for about a year and a half." I did not say anything. I could not. She kept going. "I did not know when we met. You never told me his name those first few months, and even when you did, Callum is not the rarest name in the world, and I did not connect it. But a few months in, you described him, the watch, the mentoring program he brags about, the exact way he works a room, and I knew. I knew the man you had been telling me about, the one who had been hurting you for years, was sitting across from me every Tuesday at 4. and I could not tell you. I could not tell you a single thing because that is his, not mine, to give away. I felt like the world was tilting. I said, "So, what did you do?" Sloan said, "The right thing. The day I was sure, I ended our professional relationship. I told him I was no longer able to be his therapist for reasons I could not disclose, and I transferred him to a colleague I trust. I documented all of it, the date, the reason, the referral, and I talked it through with my clinical supervisor so there was a record, and I did not let myself feel anything about you, anything real, until that was completely finished and clean. That is why it took me so long to say something on that tailgate. I was waiting until I knew there was no overlap, until I knew I was not crossing a line. I would never cross that line. I sat there trying to take it all in. Then I asked the question that was burning a hole in me. What did you say to him at the party? Sloan exhaled. He did not recognize me at first. I have a different last name than the one on my office door. I had my hair down. It had been months. He hit on me the entire night you saw it. And at the bar cart, he leaned in and told me I was wasted on you, that you were the quiet, boring brother, that I should give him my number and find out what I was missing. And I looked at him and I said very quietly, "Callum, it is Dr. Hale, Tuesdays at 4. And I think we both know that is enough." I started laughing. Not happy laughing exactly, more like something that had been clenched in my chest for 10 years, finally letting go. Sloan did not laugh. She said, "I am not telling you this to win anything. I am telling you because you deserve to know who you are with, and because I think this is about to get complicated, and I would rather you hear all of it from me first." That should have been the end of the story. Callum got exposed. He failed for the first time. I won for once. We should have just driven off into the sunset, but life is never that simple. A week later, my mom called me. She sounded upset. She said Callum had come over and told everyone that I had done something unforgivable, that I had brought his own therapist to Thanksgiving as some kind of cruel setup, that I had clearly known and orchestrated the whole thing to humiliate him, that he felt violated and exposed in front of his entire family. I was furious. I said, "Mom, I did not know. I found out in the car on the way home, same as anyone." My mom sighed. She said, "Nolan, honey, I know you and your brother have history, but using a man's private medical situation to embarrass him at a holiday is a new low. Your father is very upset. Grandma Lorraine is heartbroken. And Callum says what that woman did is illegal, that therapists are not allowed to do what she did, and he is going to make sure she pays for it." I hung up on her. I did not talk to my family for 3 weeks. My phone was full of texts from various relatives. My aunt said I was being cruel and calculating. My uncle said I owed Callum an apology and that real men do not ambush their own brothers. My other cousins, the ones who had always orbited Callum, sent these careful, disappointed messages about how they were not taking sides, but they really thought I had crossed a line. Grandma Lorraine left a voicemail, her voice shaking, saying she had never been more ashamed. My cousin Cora, who I had always liked, did not text anything at all, which I noticed. Only my younger sister Ren texted to say, "Callum is being so dramatic. Sloan seems great, and honestly, he had it coming. It would have been funny if it did not eat at me." It always amazed me how fast the family could assemble around Callum, how the same people who watched him take woman after woman from me and called it harmless could turn into a jury in under a week the one time he did not get what he wanted. The idea that I had finally found someone real, someone who saw me and my family, had managed to make me the villain and Callum the victim inside of a week. The idea that he could lose for once and still somehow end up the center of attention. Christmas came. I did not go. I spent it at Sloane's place. She made a roast and we watched bad movies, and she did not ask me invasive questions or make passive-aggressive comments. It was the best Christmas I had ever had. Then in January, I finally got a text from my cousin Cora. She said she needed to talk to me in person, that it was important. I almost said no, but something in the way she wrote it made me agree. We met at a coffee shop. Cora looked nervous. She ordered a tea and did not drink it, just held the cup in her hands. "I need to tell you something about Callum," she said, "and you are not going to like it." I waited. Cora took a breath. "You know how he has been telling everyone Sloan broke the law. Well, he has actually talked to a lawyer. He filed a complaint, or he is about to, with the state licensing board.
He is saying she was treating him and dating you at the same time, that she used things he told her in therapy to turn the family against him, that she manipulated him. He has been calling people, building a story. He wants her license pulled. He told my dad he is going to end her career." My blood went cold. "That is not what happened," I said. "He came on to her at the party. She ended his treatment months ago. She did everything by the book." Cora looked at me with this miserable expression.
"I believe you, but that is not the version going around. And Nolan, he is not bluffing. He printed things out. He has a folder. He showed Grandma Lorraine a folder. He is the one who has been calling everyone, telling them what kind of person Sloan is." I could not breathe. "Why are you telling me this?" Cora looked down at her tea. "Because everyone else is just going along with it because it is easier, and I could not let him do that to someone without warning you. He is obsessed, Nolan. He cannot handle that. For one night in his life, he was the one who got rejected. He has been talking about it non-stop. It is all he talks about. He called me at midnight last week to read me the complaint he was drafting and ask if it sounded believable. Believable, Nolan. Not true. Believable. I think this is the only way he knows how to win, by making sure someone else loses worse than he did." She wiped her eyes. And I keep thinking, if he can do this to a stranger over a few seconds of feeling small, what has he been doing to you our whole lives? And why did none of us ever say anything? I left the coffee shop in a daze. I called Sloane immediately and told her everything. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I figured this was coming. People like your brother do not get embarrassed and walk away. They burn the house down. I said, we have to stop him. We have to do something. Sloane said, there is nothing to stop. I did not do anything wrong. If he files a complaint, the board will investigate, and the investigation will show exactly what I did and when. It will get dismissed. I said, but it will be on your record. An investigation. It will follow you. Sloane sighed. Maybe. Probably. That part is real. A complaint alone can mean months of stress and legal bills even when you did everything right. I had never felt rage like what I felt in that moment. Pure burning rage at Callum for being so empty, so desperate to win, that he would try to destroy a good person's entire career just because she did not want him. I spent the next 2 days trying to figure out what to do. I considered calling Callum and threatening him. I considered going to my parents and screaming the truth. I considered hiring a lawyer of my own. Then Sloane said something that changed everything. She said, what if we just let him file it? I stared at her. What? What if we let him try to destroy your career? Sloane said, let him put it in writing. Let him make his accusation official and on the record. And then we hand the board everything that proves he is lying. I said, how? Sloane reached into her bag and pulled out a folder of her own, thick, organized, tabbed. When I realized who he was, I documented every step. The exact date I terminated his care. The referral to my colleague, who can confirm he became her client. My note to my clinical supervisor explaining the situation in general terms, time-stamped. There was no overlap, Nolan. None. I was his therapist. Then I stopped, fully and formally, and only months after that did I let anything start with you. The timeline is airtight, and it is all in writing, dated, witnessed. Then she pulled out her phone, and there is this. She opened her messages. The night of Thanksgiving, after we left, before he realized what had happened, your brother texted me. He got my number off your sister's phone, I think. Look, she held it up. There it was, time-stamped that night. Callum, can't stop thinking about you. Nolan never has to know. You felt it too. And then 20 minutes later, after it had clearly clicked for him who I was, delete that. Forget tonight happened. I read it 3 times. Sloane said, he is going to walk into a licensing board and swear under penalty of perjury that I pursued him, that I used my position to seduce my way into his family. And then they are going to see a message, sent from his phone, the night in question, where he is the one propositioning a woman he had just been introduced to as his brother's girlfriend, and then trying to bury it. He is not the victim in his own evidence. He is the aggressor in writing. I looked at her. You kept all of this, just in case. Sloane said, I sit across from manipulative people for a living, Nolan. I learned a long time ago to protect myself and to never ever rely on someone like that telling the truth later. Documentation is the only thing that survives a person rewriting history. We decided to wait. If Callum filed his complaint, we would respond with the timeline and the text and let it fall apart on its own. If he did not, we would just move on with our lives. But I did not want to wait. I was tired of waiting. I was tired of letting Callum control the room. So I did something I had never done before in my life. I called a family meeting. I told my mom that I wanted everyone at the house that Sunday, Callum included, because there were things that needed to be said with everyone present, and that if they cared about this family at all, they would be there. To my surprise, they agreed. I think part of them wanted the show. We drove over that Sunday, and the whole family was packed into my parents' living room. My mom and dad, Grandma Lorraine, my aunt and uncle, Cora, Ren, and Callum, sitting in the middle of the couch like a king holding court, already wearing the wounded expression he had been wearing for weeks. He started before I even sat down. I hope you are here to apologize, he said, loud enough for everyone, for what you and that woman did to me. I did not raise my voice. I had decided I was not going to raise my voice. I said, Callum says Sloane broke the law. He says she was his therapist and my girlfriend at the same time and used his private information against him. He has told all of you that. Some of you believe it. I looked around the room. So let us look at what actually happened with dates. And then calmly, one by one, I laid it out. The date Sloane terminated his care, which his new therapist could confirm. The fact that she and I did not become anything until months after that. The fact that she never told me one single thing about his sessions. Not then, not now. That I did not even know he was her client until we were driving home from Thanksgiving. I told them that the woman they had all decided was a predator had actually done the single most ethical thing a person in her position could do, the moment she realized the conflict, at a cost to herself, quietly, with no audience. I watched Callum's face as I spoke. I watched the confidence start to crack at the edges. I watched him glance at our mother to see if the old magic was still holding, the look that had gotten him out of everything since he was 6 years old. That is a lie, he said, but it came out thinner than he wanted it to. She has been manipulating this whole family from the start. He is twisting everything. You all know how he is. A few heads nodded, out of habit more than belief. The story was still his. He had walked in owning the room, and he was not going to give it up easily. And that was when I took out my phone. I said, Callum, on the night of Thanksgiving, what did you text Sloane? The room went still. He went pale. He said, I did not text her anything. I said, "You are sure?" He said, "I never had her number." I read it out loud. "Can't stop thinking about you. Nolan never has to know. You felt it too." Then the second one. "Delete that. Forget tonight happened." I let it sit there in the silence, the same silence Sloan had used on him at the party, and I watched my brother drown in it. My mom said, "Callum, just his name, just that." He started talking fast, the way he always did when he was cornered, saying it was taken out of context, that he had been drinking, that I had clearly put her up to it, that this was exactly the kind of cruel game I played, but it did not land. For the first time in 30 years, the charm did not work, because everyone in that room had just heard, in his own words, the man who had spent a decade telling the family he was the victim, propositioning his brother's girlfriend, and then trying to make her hide it. Grandma Lorraine, who had defended Callum his entire life, who had told me to carry myself with more confidence, looked at him and said very quietly, "You sent that?" And Callum had no answer. My dad stood up and walked out of the room. My aunt would not look at him. Cora was crying. And Callum sat there in the middle of the couch with the whole family finally seeing him clearly, all his life, for the very first time. I stood up. I said, "If you file that complaint against Sloan, the board is going to see exactly what everyone in this room just saw. So go ahead, file it." Then I took Sloan's hand and we walked out. And behind us, I could hear my brother saying my name, over and over, the way a person calls out when they have just realized the floor is gone. And for the first time in my entire life, I did not turn around.